doesn't mean shit! They're not even the real Kate!
We're all the real Kate.
In this video, we're gonna tell you the full story of Dupli-Kate. There are full spoilers ahead, guys. You have been warned. Dupli-Kate is magic. The superhero Dupli-Kate, whose real name is Kate Cha, was born to parents Sing Cha and his unnamed wife. Kate had a twin named Paul, who would one day become known as the supervillain Multi-Paul. The two manifested their powers at a very early age. But here's the important thing you should know. The Cha twins' ability to create duplicates of themselves wasn't unprecedented. There's a whole story to it, and to find out about that, we have to turn back the clock a few centuries before the start of the Invincible series, back to the Far East in ancient China. Hundreds of years ago, the Cha family's ancestor and notorious warlord Feng Cha usurped the Chinese emperor's throne. But before the emperor drew his last breath, he placed a curse on Feng Cha. Well, it's more like a curse placed on the entire bloodline, to be more precise. The emperor's curse stated that the 7th generation of Feng Cha's 7th grandchild will have a family so large that it will inevitably drive his descendant insane. Now fast forward to the modern era, just a decade and some change before the start of the Invincible series, and the twins, Kate and Paul Cha, happen to be the 7th generation that sprung from Feng Cha's 7th grandchild. So, of course, the ancient emperor's curse kicked in. It would be an understatement to say that the Cha twins had an easy childhood. For one, their mother died as a result of giving birth to Kate and Paul. Then, there's the fact that the emperor's curse manifested just a few years after they were born, which came in the form of Kate and Paul having the ability to create multiple versions of themselves. Given that they were toddlers, you can bet that the kids had no control over this power. This all came to a head when both Kate and Paul uncontrollably multiplied and created hundreds upon hundreds of copies of themselves. And just as the emperor's curse foretold, their father, Sing, lost his mind because of this occurrence, which ultimately ended up with him becoming committed to a mental hospital. Things quickly started to spiral from there. Without a parent to care for the twins, Kate and Paul ended up under the government's care, which they were more or less treated as science experiments than they were children. Throughout their childhood, experts and big brain scientists would try to decipher the source of Kate and Paul's abilities, to no avail. Regardless, both twins eventually learned to control their powers of duplication by the time they were in their teens. Soon after that, Kate and Paul would enter the crime-fighting business under the guise of Dupli-Kate and Multi-Paul, respectively. Dupli-Kate, full-time hero. Now here's where things start to diverge for the twins. After some time fighting evildoers as a dynamic duo, Kate would eventually meet the teen team led by fellow superhero Robot, and she'd join the group. On the other hand, Multi-Paul would fall off the face of the earth and eventually reemerge as a supervillain, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. As for Kate, she'd thrive with the teen team as they went on regular adventures to thwart the world's villains. At one point, she along with the rest of her clique would meet Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, during one of their crime-fighting exploits. But as you'd expect from this classic comic book series, life isn't all about the capes and tights, and Dupli-Kate is no exception. You see, during her stint as part of the teen team, Dupli-Kate met Rex Sloan, aka Rexplode. At this time, Rex had been in a romantic relationship with fellow teen team member Samantha Eve Wilkins, Adam Eve. Dupli-Kate would start an affair with Rex as the two started sleeping together regularly. Adam Eve would eventually discover this and call things off with Rex. Right after that, he and Kate would start dating on a slightly deeper level. But take note, only slightly, but more on that later. While all of this relationship drama was happening, the US superhero community had just experienced a status quo shifting event. First, the superhero Omni-Man was revealed to be a traitor to Earth who is responsible for massacring the original premier superhero team of the world, the Guardians of the Globe. In its aftermath, the Global Defense Agency led by Cecil promoted the teen team's leader Robot to become the new head of the newly revamped Guardians of the Globe. Ultimately, Robot and the GDA would hold auditions for this brand new spanking team, and both Rex and Kate would make the cut. Kate's time with this newly formed Guardians team was decent, all things considered. She performed to the best of her abilities whenever they were faced with catastrophic threats, such as the interdimensional invaders called the Flaxons, who tried to take over Earth. Now, we say that Kate's performance during these battles was decent, but that term's pretty relative. To give you an idea, on one hand, this new Guardians of the Globe roster paled in comparison to the original lineup. For the most part, their encounters with those supervillains did end up with a W for the team, but it always came with a hefty price, such as billions millions of dollars in property damage, or a guardian or two getting absolutely bodied and hospitalized. They're not performing up to Cecil's standards is what we're saying. But on the other hand, Kate always found herself surviving these battles with relatively minor injuries, while compared to that of some of her teammates. So yeah, you can think of Dupli-Kate as the trusty role player of the team, then let's say its star. In sports terms, she was more of the Dallas Mavericks Derrick Jones Jr. than she was Luka Doncic. Now, it's only a matter of time before the US government's higher-ups in the GDA did something about the continuous subpar performance of this new Guardians of the Globe. So, management eventually decided to get cooking by adding original Guardian member, the Immortal, to this young roster to serve as their consultant in hopes of improving the team's performance, after they discovered that this long-lived superhero was still alive after his run-in with Omni-Man. They also added former independent superhero Bulletproof to the team just to make sure that they get over the slump, but these changes would still prove to be inadequate to boost the Guardians' performance. In the end, Robot got demoted and the Immortal was installed as the new leader. Now, you might not have known this yet, but Immortal's arrival to the team would shake things up not just for Kate's superhero career, but her personal life as well. The duplicitous Dupli-Kate. Remember when we told you earlier that Rex and Kate started dating on a slightly more serious level? Well, we hope we weren't shipping those two crazy kids too hard, because not long after the Immortal's inclusion to the new Guardians team, that he and Kate turned the tables on the cheating Rex and found herself now having an affair with the Immortal. Rex would find out about this, he'd whine about it for a bit, but ultimately get over himself. As for Kate and the Immortal, well, it seemed that the multiplying Maven finally found her soulmate, as she and the Immortal ended up getting into a more serious relationship. So serious, in fact, that they eventually got engaged and married, and at this point, it seemed that Kate Shaw had finally found her ride or die. But believe us when we say that somebody is about to die in this duo. The death of Dupli-Kate. Dupli-Kate and the Immortal would continue to serve under the Guardians well after their marriage, and for the most part, the two characters would mainly be seen as background characters whenever main players like Invincible or Adam Eve were fighting threats. Kate would once again get back into the spotlight during a couple of fateful missions. First, there was a Sequid invasion where most of the Guardians of the Globe had to travel to space to fend off the extraterrestrials before they could reach Earth. Hard-hitting Guardian members like the Immortal, Bulletproof, and Black Samson went on to this mission mainly because their physical attributes were more resilient to the Sequid's ability to worm their way into a person's body and basically turn them into meat puppets. And given that Dupli-Kate's power set didn't have this Luke Cage-like resistance, she, along with a couple of other Guardians, Rex and the size-changing Shrinking Ray, were assigned to be reserves. They were to stay on Earth and protect it just in case Alpha Team fails to stop the Sequids landing on the planet. Now, while that preemptive strike against the incoming Sequids was happening in space, the remaining Guardians received a distress call informing them that the supervillain group called the Lizard League are trying to break into a facility in Wyoming to steal nuclear weapons. Given that there's no one else around, Kate, Rex, and Shrinking Ray were deployed to deal with this problem. Little did they know that this problem was much bigger than they thought. The three reserves fought valiantly, if nothing else. Hell, the trio even ended up winning this match against the serpent-themed terrorists, but it came at a price. For one, Shrinking Ray absolutely got brutally bodied by Komodo Dragon, the Lizard League's resident strongman. Then there's the fact that Rex took a bullet to the head, which miraculously didn't kill him, but left him in a coma. And as for Dupli-Kate, yeah, Komodo got his hands on her too, and like Shrinking Ray, she ended up getting placed in a body bag. Well, multiple body bags because of her powers. Kate's death would hit the Immortal hard when he found out about it. Sure, he may have had dozens, if not hundreds of wives throughout his centuries-long life, but we bet that none of them could manage a menage a trois with herself, so we completely understand how the Immortal felt. And that's it. Kate's dead. The end. Roll credits. Dupli-Kate, born again. As the issues passed, they eventually revealed that Dupli-Kate was still alive all along without making it feel like a cheap soap opera trope. You heard that right. Reports about the Mistress of Multiplication's death were gravely exaggerated, because sometime after her supposed death, the Immortal gets a curious message from someone claiming herself to be Kate Shaw and asks him to meet her in a cabin tucked away somewhere in the mountains. The Immortal would do as he was told, and when he got there, he'd find out it really was Kate. No tricks, no jokes. This was his wife. So how did Dupli-Kate survive after literally getting ripped apart? The answer to that is insurance. And we're not talking about the supervillain called private healthcare providers either. You see, the way that Dupli-Kate's power works is that each and every one of her copies can be considered a genuine article. There's no quote-unquote main Dupli-Kate that you have to kill that will make the rest suddenly pop out of existence. To definitively kill someone like Kate, you have to flatline each and every one of her body bodies at any given point in time. Now, this was something that she knew right from the beginning, so as insurance to make sure that she survives whatever happens whenever she puts on the costume and fights crime, Kate made sure that she had a single body safely hidden away. That means if all her other copies on the field died, she'd still have one remaining body and ultimately survive whatever deadly encounter she might face. Pretty smart, right? Not long after that, Invincible and Rex would encounter a couple of C-list supervillains named Dropkick and Fightmaster after the pair attempted to steal the Declaration of Independence. It was during this encounter that Multipal, who was working with the two villains, revealed himself to the heroes and proceeded to attack Rex. Kate's twin believed that Rex was basically the mastermind who orchestrated her murder at the hands of the Lizard League. So he, Rex, and Invincible get into a tussle, but things ultimately calm down when the Immortal and Dupli-Kate arrive on the scene to clear things up. Invincible and Rex are shocked to find out that Kate's still alive. She tells her twin that everything's cool and even thanks him, as we find out that it was Paul's original idea to always leave one copy of themselves away from battle as a safety measure, and by the end of that encounter, Invincible apprehends Multipal. Shortly after that, Dupli-Kate would reveal herself to the rest of the Guardians and she'd return to its active roster. She'd eventually let the Immortal know that she plans on quitting the whole superhero gig down the road so they can start a family. Perhaps the most notable thing that happened to her during this period was when she and the Immortal almost got killed again when the evil interdimensional Mark Graysons tried to attack Earth in the event known as the Invincible War. Still, they'd end up surviving that and attend Rex's funeral after her ex sacrificed himself in a blaze of glory during the war. Dupli-Kate retires. Almost. Now, it would take a minute before the series gets up to speed with Kate again, and the next time we'd see her would be about a year or two after the Invincible War, as we find out that she and Immortal had settled down and gave birth to a couple of kids. But in no way was she and her hubby out of the superhero life just yet. Think of this more as a soft retirement than a full-fledged one, because when Robot turned heel and started to enact his plan of ruling the world, Kate had no choice but to don the tights again when she and the Immortal became targets of Robot's campaign to assassinate his old allies to ensure no one would threaten his rule. Kate and her family would then find safe haven in their old secret mountain cabin. At this point, Kate has fully put the superhero life in the rear view mirror, but her husband has other plans, as the Immortal tried to draft Invincible and Adam Eve to form an insurgent group to fight Robot, who has succeeded in becoming the Earth's supreme dictator. That didn't go as planned because Mark and Eve refused the offer and migrated to a different planet instead. Sometime later, Robot would uncover Kate and her family's whereabouts and attempt to assassinate them. The Immortal would allow himself to get captured by Robot's mechs to give Kate and their children an opening to escape. Ultimately, the Immortal would be able to free himself from Robot's clutches and reunite with his family at some point in the series. And after that, well, they basically go into hiding for quite a while. In the meantime, Mark would find himself traveling to a different world set at the beginning of the series. There, he'd meet a version of Dupli-Kate who was basically no different from the mainline Invincible universe's version of the character. And after that whole stint, Mark would come back to his original timeline, but set 5 years after his initial disappearance. Now, Kate and her family would only re-emerge when they decide to join Mark and the superhero rebel alliance against Robot. This whole chapter of their lives culminates in an all-out war with Robot's army made up of his automated mechs and conscripted with half Viltrumites, where Dupli-Kate, the Immortal, and even their kids, who had become tweens presumably with their dad's powers, would contribute in the grand skirmish. In the end, Invincible defeats Robot, and that's pretty much the last time we see her. Apart from the fact that we know that she survived the Robot War, the final issue of Invincible only shows the Immortal, who's still an active Guardian of the Globe member tasked with overseeing Robot's captive sentient brain. As for Kate, well, we like to think that she got one of those oh-so-rare, honest-to-goodness happy endings in the series, retiring from life as a superhero to be a mom to her kids.